Because the financial system is mathematically engineered to keep you exhausted. If you do not understand these 6 laws of money, you will never get rich. Most Americans ignore them entirely. They stay trapped. They stay permanently broke. Your savings account is actively bleeding you dry. Inflation is not your biggest enemy. It is the invisible architecture of commercial banking. They leverage your own deposits as a weapon against you. Click off this video right now and you surrender. You surrender your capital to a highly predatory system, a system that profits directly from your financial illiteracy. Look at this raw data from the Federal Reserve. Since 2020, middle-class purchasing power absolutely collapsed. Simultaneously, luxury asset and equity markets exploded. Why the massive, unprecedented disconnect? Because the top 1% deploy specific, ruthless financial frameworks. I use these exact architectural rules every single day. They protect 7-figure portfolios from absolute economic slaughter. Today, we decode these 6 hidden laws of money. I will hand you the exact tactical blueprint to escape. We will dismantle the velocity of capital trap. We will expose the phantom equity illusion keeping you paralyzed. But you must pay brutal, obsessive attention to law number 4. Law 4 is the absolute linchpin holding this entire matrix together. If you miss Law 4, the other 5 will actively bankrupt you. The first reality you have to accept is that the middle class treats money like a battery, while the wealthy treat money like a current. This brings us to the first law of capital architecture, the mandate of velocity. You have been indoctrinated since childhood to believe that saving money is the ultimate virtue. You are taught to take your excess capital, put it in a high-yield savings account, and let it sit there. You look at the balance on your banking app, you see the number slowly creeping up, and your brain releases a hit of dopamine. You feel safe, you feel responsible, but you are being actively liquidated by a hidden math equation. Let me break down exactly what happens when you deposit $10,000 into a standard commercial bank. You think that money is sitting in a digital vault waiting for you? It is not. Under the fractional reserve banking system, the bank is legally permitted to take your $10,000, hold a tiny fraction in reserve, and lend the rest out multiple times over. They take the exact capital you worked 400 hours to save, and they loan it to your neighbor for an auto loan at 8%. They loan it to a small business at 12%. They issue credit cards backed by that liquidity at 24%. The bank is utilizing the velocity of your money to generate massive, compounding yields. And what is your cut for providing the raw material for their wealth engine? Maybe 1 or 2% if you are lucky. Meanwhile, real inflation, not the manipulated CPI numbers the government feeds you, but the actual cost of housing, food, and energy is running significantly higher. The purchasing power of your stagnant capital is burning alive in that account. Wealthy people do not hoard cash. They hoard assets that cash can buy. They understand that capital must move, it must circulate, and it must be put to work immediately. Every dollar you own is an employee. If your employees are sitting in a bank account, they are sleeping on the job while inflation slowly assassinates them. You must force your capital into velocity. You move it into cash-flowing real estate. You move it into dividend-yielding equities. You move it into acquiring cash-generating digital assets or funding your own proprietary business systems. If your money is not moving, it is dying. This flows directly into the second massive delusion you must break, the phantom equity trap. The middle class operates under the assumption that if they own a primary residence and a nice car, they are building wealth. They look at their house, see the Zestimate went up $40,000, and they feel rich. They are falling for the oldest trick in the consumer economy. Your primary residence is not an asset. It is a highly illiquid liability that masks itself as wealth. Let us look at the gritty reality of the American dream. A mid-level director pulling down $140,000 a year buys a $600,000 house with a traditional 30-year mortgage. They think they own an asset. But let us run the actual forensic accounting. Every single month, capital leaves their pocket to pay property taxes, which constantly increase. Capital leaves to pay homeowners insurance, which is skyrocketing globally. Capital leaves to fix the HVAC system, repair the roof, and maintain the landscaping. Most importantly, capital leaves to pay the massive interest load front-loaded onto that mortgage by the bank. If an item drains cash from your pocket every single 30 days, it is a liability. I do not care what the hypothetical appraisal value is on paper. Unless you sell it or rent it out, you cannot buy groceries with home equity. You cannot fund a new business with drywall. Phantom equity creates the illusion of financial progress while slowly suffocating your actual liquid cash flow. And then there is the ultimate wealth destroyer, the financed depreciating liability. The consumer economy survives by convincing you to trade your future labor for present-day status. Let us take the guy who walks into a dealership and finances an $80,000 luxury SUV. He is convinced he negotiated a great deal. He even brags about the interest rate. But what did he actually do? He just signed a legally binding contract to pay $95,000 over 5 years for a piece of metal and plastic that will be mathematically worth $35,000 the moment his final payment clears. He is bleeding capital from both ends, the interest payment to the lender and the catastrophic depreciation curve of the vehicle itself. The wealthy separate utility from investment. They drive reliable, paid-off vehicles or lease through their corporations as a tax write-off, explicitly treating the car as a business expense rather than a personal flex. They rent their primary residences if the cap rates in their city are inverted, keeping their heavy capital fully liquid so they can deploy it into investments that actually pay them every month. They measure wealth exclusively by net positive monthly cash flow, not by the imaginary value of the things they own. And the single greatest tool they use to protect that cash flow is the tax code. Which brings us to the third law. Taxes are not a penalty. They are a behavioral incentive map. Most people look at the IRS as a punisher. You get your paycheck, you see a massive chunk missing, and you accept it as the painful cost of living in society. You operate in a system where you are taxed on your gross production before you ever see a dime. W-2 employees make money, the government takes their massive cut immediately, and the employee is left to survive on the scraps. This is not an accident. The tax code is literally a blueprint written by the financial elite, telling you exactly what the government wants you to do. The government cannot physically build enough housing for the population. It cannot physically create enough jobs. It cannot physically produce enough energy. So, how do they solve this? They write a tax code that says, if you build housing, if you employ people, if you drill for energy, we will legally allow you to keep almost all of your money. When a real estate investor buys a multi-family apartment building, the tax code allows them to execute a cost segregation study and accelerate the depreciation of that asset. They can literally generate massive paper losses that wipe out their tax liability, while the property is simultaneously generating positive, tax-free cash flow into their bank account every single month. They are doing exactly what the government wants, providing housing, and they are being rewarded with a 0% effective tax rate. If you are operating as a pure W-2 earner, you are playing the game on the highest possible difficulty setting. You have no deductions. You have no leverage. You must begin restructuring your income streams. You must funnel capital through corporate entities, limited liability companies, and S corporations. You must shift your mindset from earning and paying taxes to earning, spending on pre-tax growth, and only paying taxes on the absolute minimum net remainder. If you are sitting there realizing that your entire financial foundation is built on sand, and you want the exact step-by-step strategies to build impenetrable economic armor, hit the subscribe button right now. We do not do generic fluff on this channel. We engineer tactical wealth preservation for the modern economy, and if you aren't adapting, you are becoming obsolete. Now, we arrive at the critical threshold. I warned you in the first 60 seconds that law number 4 is the absolute linchpin. If you implement everything we just discussed, velocity, avoiding phantom equity, tax optimization, but you fail to grasp this next principle, you will still hit a permanent, unbreakable ceiling. Law 4 is the mandate of asymmetric risk. The middle class is deeply, culturally programmed to take symmetrical risk. Symmetrical risk is the linear exchange of units. You trade 1 hour of your life, and in return, you receive $50. You trade 40 hours, you receive $2,000. The risk is symmetrical because the inputs exactly match the outputs. The catastrophic flaw in this model is that your inputs are strictly finite. You only have 24 hours in a day. You need to sleep, eat, and recover. Therefore, your earning potential has a mathematically hard-coded cap. You cannot work 1,000 hours in a week. Symmetrical risk is a trap designed to keep you functioning as a cog in someone else's wealth machine. To break out of the middle class, you must forcefully pivot your life into the realm of asymmetric risk. Asymmetric risk means your potential downside is strictly capped, but your potential upside is mathematically infinite. Let me give you a gritty, exact reality check on how this works. When you write a piece of software, or record a digital masterclass, or publish a book, you might spend 200 hours of grueling, unpaid labor. Your downside risk is strictly capped at those 200 hours. If it fails completely, you lost your time. But if it succeeds, that exact same digital asset can be sold 1 time, 1,000 times, or 10 million times without requiring a single extra hour of your labor. The upside is fully decoupled from your physical effort. The wealthy aggressively hunt for convexity. They look for investments where they can risk $1,000 to potentially make $100,000. They buy distressed businesses, restructure them, and flip them for multiples of their initial capital. They invest in early-stage equities. They build automated e-commerce funnels. They refuse, under any circumstances, to tie their primary wealth generation to a clock. If you want to get rich, you have to look at every single project you take on and ask yourself one brutal question. Does this activity have a ceiling? If the answer is yes, it is not a wealth-building activity. It is simply a survival mechanism. You must begin allocating a percentage of your waking hours strictly to building systems that possess asymmetric potential. Stop trading your finite life force for linear dollars, and start building architectural machinery that prints capital while you sleep. And the fuel for that machinery brings us to the 5th law. Debt must be weaponized as an inflation hedge. We are taught that debt is an inherent evil. Dave Ramsey built an entire empire telling terrified, financially illiterate people to cut up their credit cards and live on rice and beans. And for the lowest common denominator, people who have zero financial discipline and buy flat-screen televisions on 29% APR store cards, that is decent advice. Consumer debt used to acquire depreciating liabilities will destroy your life faster than a gambling addiction. But at the apex of the financial hierarchy, debt is the most powerful weapon in the arsenal. The wealthy do not fear debt, they respect it, and they use it to short the currency. Let us look at the precise mechanics of weaponized debt. Suppose you secure a $1 million fixed-rate loan at 4% interest to acquire a commercial property. Your interest rate is locked for 30 years. Now, what happens when the government prints trillions of dollars and true inflation spikes to 7%? The purchasing power of the dollar collapses. But your debt does not adjust for inflation. Your debt is locked at the old, pre-inflation value. The asset you bought with the debt, the commercial property, inflates in value to match the new economic reality. The rental income you collect from the tenants increases because rent prices surge with inflation. But your mortgage payment to the bank stays exactly the same. You are literally paying back the bank with cheaper, heavily devalued dollars. Inflation is systematically destroying the real value of your debt, while simultaneously inflating the value of your asset. You are extracting a massive wealth transfer directly from the banking system into your own net worth. This is why the wealthy leverage fixed-rate debt on cash-flowing assets. They are effectively shorting the United States dollar. They know the government has no choice but to continually devalue the currency to manage the national deficit, so they position themselves to profit directly from that systemic decay. If you learn how to underwrite risk, and you only borrow money to acquire assets that produce a yield significantly higher than the cost of the debt, you become an unstoppable financial force. Finally, we reach the 6th law, which is the ultimate endgame of wealth architecture: the mandatory acquisition of external labor. If you want to achieve true freedom, you must eventually internalize that your own hands and your own brain are not enough. You are the bottleneck in your own empire. We established in Law 4 that you cannot scale your own hours. Therefore, the only logical solution is to purchase the hours of other people. The defining characteristic of a business owner versus a highly paid freelancer is leverage. A freelancer is trapped in a gilded cage. If they stop typing, the money stops flowing. A true business owner builds an infrastructure and then buys other people's labor at a wholesale price, processes that labor through their system, and sells the output at a retail price. You are purchasing attention, human capital, And cognitive bandwidth. You hire a virtual assistant in the Philippines for $8 an hour to handle your inbox and calendar, instantly buying back 10 hours of your week. What is the return on investment on those 10 hours if you deploy them into asymmetric risk projects? It is astronomical. You hire a media buyer to run your paid traffic, utilizing their specialized labor to multiply your capital. You are transitioning from the laborer to the architect. Money is not a moral construct. It does not care if you are a good person, and it does not care how hard you physically work. Money is an emotionless, mathematical game of structural leverage. It follows these 6 precise laws of velocity, phantom equity avoidance, tax optimization, asymmetric risk, debt weaponization, and labor acquisition. The middle class ignores these rules, plays by the outdated script of savings and linear effort, and gets ground to dust by inflation and taxes. The wealthy master these rules, build impenetrable systems, and compound their capital generation generationally. The system is entirely rigged, but it is rigged in plain sight. Now that you know the exact mechanics of how the board is structured, it is entirely on you to stop playing the victim and start playing the architect. Implement these laws, restructure your capital, and refuse to let the system consume you.